How historically accurate is the new Netflix series Death by Lightning? Let's talk about it.
The ongoing chaos in America? It's nothing new. Rewind to 1881, a president assassinated by a deranged stranger, a scandal-ridden vice president thrust into power overnight. Sound familiar? This is the kind of jaw-dropping saga that should be etched into every history book, yet it vanished into the shadows of time, until now. A provocative new series has dragged this forgotten American tragedy back into the spotlight, but there's a catch. Death by Lightning resurrects the shocking story of Chester Arthur's unexpected rise to power. Yet the lines between historical truth and Hollywood drama are dangerously blurred. What really happened in those chaotic days? Which scenes are ripped from the history books, and which are pure fiction crafted for maximum shock value? Stay tuned as we unravel the truth behind the spectacle and discover just how much creative liberty the series took with one of America's most overlooked political earthquakes.
It also is based on real historical events. So in this video, I want to provide a general overview of how much the show gets that's accurate.
Did Garfield really not want to be president? The series depicts Garfield as a quiet man from the Midwest who reminds people of Cincinnatus, the Roman leader who gave up his tremendous power and returned to his farm as soon as the state of emergency ended. The comparison reflects Garfield as steady and modest, a man who answered the call to serve but found real comfort in the calm life on his family's land in Ohio. It suggests a question many people might ask. How does a man who enjoys quiet fields end up at the center of fierce national politics? Even with his wife Lucretia feeling troubled about it, Garfield is pulled to the Republican National Convention of 1880. He goes only to give a speech supporting Senator John Sherman, another Ohioan. The meeting hall is tense. The stalwart group, led by Roscoe Conkling of New York, wants the old way of giving well-paid government positions to loyal party members. Conkling has significant influence as he controls many valued appointments. On the other side stands the reform group, to which Garfield and Sherman belong. They want government posts awarded on merit, not through personal favors. Conkling delivers a strong call for former President Grant, the stalwart choice. Garfield worries about his own speech, but then provides words that lift the hall. He urges the party to hold tight to the ideas of President Lincoln and his steps toward freedom. He hardly speaks of Sherman at all. The crowd rises, moved by the moment. The votes begin, and the room stays locked in place, ballot after ballot. When the 28th vote brings a single shout for Garfield, he quickly tells the man behind it that he does not want such support. Yet the numbers rise in his favor. On the 38th vote, he becomes the chosen candidate. He feels no pride, only discomfort. Senator James G. Blaine plays a part in this turn, working quietly to bring the choice toward Garfield. Garfield then limits his public speaking to his own front porch in Ohio, choosing not to travel or campaign widely. This part of the story closely follows the truth. Garfield honestly did not want the highest office. When he heard whispers that some wished to put his name forward, he cried out in despair, saying such a move would ruin him. A year before the gathering, he wrote in his journal that the desire to become president was a danger that harmed whoever carried it. Still, Garfield was not someone who lived without outstanding achievements.
Garfield, however, was a political actor. He had just been elected to the Senate right before having his surprise victory in the 1880 Republican nomination.
His life shows steady progress upward. During the Civil War, he became the youngest brigadier general in the country, and a daring ride through enemy ground earned him the rank of Major General. He reached the United States Congress from Ohio without even running a whole campaign, after President Lincoln urged him to leave the Army and serve in government. He remained in Congress for 18 years and rose to minority leader during the presidency of Rutherford B. Hayes. These steps show a man who understood the path of politics. He had aims and drive, though he never desired the presidency itself. Another factor in the movie that people have been curious about is Charles Guiteau's brain. Is the brain in a museum, or has it been lost for a long time? The story opens with a jolt when it reveals that in 1969, nearly one full century after James Garfield died, Charles Guiteau's brain was still kept in the Army Medical Museum in Washington, District of Columbia. The show explains this in its final part. During Guiteau's autopsy, the doctors wanted to see if his brain carried some physical mark that could explain his troubled mind. They searched with great care. They found only one odd detail. which was the unusually thick dura mater wrapped around his brain. Beyond that, nothing stood out. It makes a person pause and wonder what the doctors hoped they would find, and what it would have changed if they had seen it. Pieces of his brain did not stay in one place. Over the years, different parts ended up elsewhere. Some found their way to the collection at the Mutter Museum at the College of Physicians of Philadelphia. Other pieces reached the National Museum of Health and Medicine. The doctors also kept his large spleen, which they believed would help them better understand his health. It is strange how the remains of one man traveled so far, and it makes a person wonder how many hands carried them and how many people knew their history. However, there is a contradiction in the facts. Guiteau chose the ivory-handled revolver for the shooting because he believed it looked worthy of a museum. He imagined that the weapon would one day sit behind glass where people could study it. His brain did reach museums, but the revolver did not. The gun once entered the Smithsonian collection but later went missing. No one has placed it on display. It leaves a quiet thought hanging in suspicion about how objects move through time and how something meant to be remembered can simply vanish. One of the most surprising details in Death by Lightning is the presence of the great inventor, Alexander Graham Bell. Is it true that Bell and President James knew each other? Here is the truth. Alexander Graham Bell's presence in the final part of Death by Lightning is not placed there for effect. His role is drawn straight from the real events of that time. The National Park Service records show that Bell read reports about Dr. Willard Bliss and his repeated efforts to locate the bullet inside President James Garfield's body. When Bell learned what Bliss was doing, he realized that his earlier work with induction balance for the telephone could be turned into a tool for detecting metal. This thought pushed him to act, and it makes a person wonder how often an idea from one field suddenly becomes useful in another. Bell began testing. He tried his device on wooden boards with bullets in them. He tried it on animal bodies. He then tested it on men who had fought in the Civil War and still carried bullets inside them. After he saw that the device responded, he brought it to the White House. At that moment, the responsibility shifted to Bliss. Bliss insisted that Bell only examine the right side of Garfield's chest because he believed the bullet rested there. Bell followed the direction he was given. The bullet, however, lay on the left side of Garfield's chest. It leaves a person thinking about how a single wrong instruction can change the path of a life, and how different the outcome might have been if Bell had been allowed to search freely. Bell's device worked as it was meant to work. What failed was the guidance he received. The facts unfold quietly, leaving their weight without needing any added force. Despite being shot, do you know that President Garfield did not die because of the bullet? What really killed him? Death by Lightning states in its final episode that President James Garfield died from infection rather than from the bullet wound itself. 79 days passed between the moment he was shot and the day he died. And during that long stretch of time, his doctors probed his back again and again with hands that were not washed and with tools that were not cleaned.
A lot of the details surrounding his unnecessary death due to medical malpractice quite correctly.
Dr. Willard Bliss stood at the center of the medical team. He knew of the British surgeon Joseph Lister and his work on antisepsis, yet he made no use of it. In the series, Charles Purvis, who served as surgeon-in-chief of the Freedmen's Hospital and was the first black physician to treat a living president, reminded Bliss of Lister's ideas. Bliss brushed it aside. Something similar happened in real life as well, when Purvis asked Bliss to stop the repeated, invasive examinations. It raises the thought of how a single refusal can change the entire course of a case. There is an uncomfortable turn in Bliss's own past. Years earlier, he had supported black doctors. The District of Columbia Medical Society removed him from its membership for opposing its rule barring black physicians. He also showed interest in homeopathy, which added to the dispute. Garfield praised him at that time for taking that stand. 6 years after that moment, Bliss reversed himself. He apologized to the society to regain his place. The contrast between his earlier courage and his later retreat stands quietly in the record, showing how choices can shift with time and pressure. Did Lucretia Garfield visit Charles J. Guiteau? In prison, there is no record of Lucretia Crete Garfield visiting Charles Guiteau in prison. The series builds that meeting from imagination, and Tudum confirms that the creator Makowski added it for the story. Matthew McFadyen explained to Tudum that in the scene, she tells Guiteau that his memory will fade and his name will amount to nothing, and that this is the one message that cuts deepest for him. It leads to a quiet thought about how much a person fears being forgotten. In Death by Lightning, Lucretia also says she plans to stop the release of Guiteau's book. There is no evidence that she took part in anything like that. The Harvard Countway Library notes that Guiteau wrote The Truth and the Removal to defend his act against President Garfield, and the book reached the public. The idea of her blocking it is only in the series. What Lucretia did do carries its own weight in the country's history. After her husband's death, she kept his papers, his letters, and the records that marked his life in public service. Her careful work formed the base of what later became the first presidential memorial library. It leaves a quiet question about how much of a legacy survives because someone chooses to preserve it. Death by Lightning is a great series, though Netflix's portrayal of the story differs in a couple of ways. It's understandable, since historical events are often mixed with scenes that captivate audiences. However, what do you think about Life and Garfield's fate with Abraham Lincoln? Lone gunmen killed both. They didn't die instantly, and both were assassinated while serving as president. Let's hear from you in the comments. If you enjoy these videos, then you'll enjoy these here above.